All right. I hope you can hear me now well. Is it any better? So I was just asking around the room when you guys had last started financial management to give an idea of how we can proceed. So I had asked Angel and Daisy, but unfortunately I couldn't hear you well. So if you don't mind, you could kindly repeat what you had said earlier.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Daisy. Now I can hear quite well. So please proceed.
I did my FM in May this year.
Oh, that's great. Okay, that's fun. That's even much better. What about Angel?
I did mine in December 2025.
Okay, that's good. Is that Ino? There are two Inos.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Good evening to you all. Sometime back.
Sometime back. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
And Sheila? I'll wait for Sheila. Maybe you can move on to Sharon.
Good evening.
Good evening, Sharon.
I did mine in December 2025.
Right. Okay. I can see most of you have recently just done your financial management, which is very good because advanced financial management actually builds on what you studied at FM. So it's very important that the techniques that you studied at FM are still fresh in your memory, other than just, but I'll try to make sure that whenever we're going through the items here, in case something not very clear, in case you've forgotten, please just don't hesitate to ask me. So quite importantly, first of all, it's for you to know that advanced financial management builds up. So it's builds up from financial management. And if you recall what you studied in financial management, I think there were 6 areas, and I'll just quickly run through these areas that you studied at FM. Number 1, we looked at the financial management function, if you recall. So this was basically a financial management function in terms of the decision roles and the surrounding environment in terms of macro and macroeconomic factors. So that was the first item we discussed, studied. Number 2, you looked at working capital management. Basically, the components that make up working capital in terms of short-term assets and short-term liabilities and how this can be utilized effectively for purposes of increasing shareholder value. Number 3, you looked at investment appraisal, which is basically the techniques of selecting or choosing investments. Number 4, where you covered business finance. And in that aspect, you also looked at working capital management as well. So just not working capital management, sorry, WACC, which is the weighted average cost of capital. Number 5, you looked at risk management, how to manage forex risk and how to manage interest rate risk. And then lastly, number 6, you looked at business valuations. So basically, this is what you covered at FM. Now, advanced financial management is simply building on this. So what we're going to cover at advanced is simply basically a continuation of what you covered here. So just to show you. So this is what you covered at FM. What we shall cover now at advanced will be basically number 1. Basically a continuation of this. We shall look at the 6 syllabus areas. The first syllabus area will look at what we refer to as the role of finance executives. Number 2, we'll then move on to something that is similar, which is what we refer to as advanced investment appraisal. Number 3, we'll come and look at what we refer to as mergers and acquisitions. And mergers of acquisition basically builds on what you covered under business valuations. Number 4, we shall look at advanced risk management. Number 5, we'll look at corporate reconstructions and organizations. So this will be constructions and organizations. And lastly, 6, we'll look at we'll basically focus on professional skills. So those are the 6 areas that we'll cover under advanced investment appraisal. Sorry, advanced financial management, AFM. So what are the key differences between 2? Of course, the first one, FM, is basically just at the lower level, and advanced, of course, at the higher level. But the key differences here is, and what the examiner expects of you, key differences. And examiner's expectations. So the first thing the examiner assumes a student at this level is that they assume that 1, you are a senior finance executive. So they expect you to think strategically and not rationally. Please take note of that. The examiner assumes that you are at a senior level. Either you're the CFO, or you're the financial manager, or you're the CEO. But that's the expectation that the examiner has of you. So they expect you, when you given a scenario in the exam, look at it in a strategic angle. So senior executives. Number 2, in most cases, the examiner will look at a multinational setting. Multinational setting, which simply means that they expect you to have comprehension of global issues and issues that cut across different jurisdictions. So most times they'll assume that the company you're dealing with or the organization you're dealing with is a multinational corporation, not referred to as MNCs, multinational corporations. The second aspect, or the third aspect, is that in most cases, the examiners will give you complex scenarios. Well, they'll look complex, but they expect you to look at the information given. And of course, it will be quite a bulk of information that will be provided in the scenarios. So the examiner expects you to think very fast through those complex scenarios and provide latitude in what is expected of you. So please be aware. Number 1, you have to think strategically as a senior executive. Number 2, you must think across multiple jurisdictions and companies or organizations that are transacting or doing business across the globe. Number 3, expect complex scenarios in the exam. But this should not be a problem going forward, because we're going to go through all of us here, and I expect that by the time we are done, it will be much easier and smooth sailing for you. All right. So these are the 6 areas of your syllabus, and I'll go through each of them just briefly, and then from there we shall then move to the first area of the syllabus. But what is covered under the role of senior executives? the first area. What is covered here? This is basically it's more theoretical than computation. But there are a couple of things the examiner expects you to know, and this is knowledge brought forward. That, for example, I expect a student to know what the objectives of companies are. What are the company objectives? And by now you have an idea that in financial management, the primary objective is maximization of shareholder value. But you must know that a company organization has competing interests. So please be aware that while the objective is to maximize shareholder value, but there will also be competing interests. Second aspect, the examiner expects you to know strategy formulation. Both the business strategy and also financial strategy. How is the company positioned in the market? Where does the company want to go? What are the challenges that the company is facing? What are its opportunities? What are the weaknesses? So they expect you at that level to be able to know how to formulate strategies, both financial strategies and business strategies. Of course, the examiner also expects to have what we refer to as macroeconomic knowledge. And here we talk about things like fiscal policies and also monetary policy. Now, remember, this is knowledge brought forward, but it is what is expected of you, that I must know the macro environment in which the company or business is operating. Do I know what the fiscal policies look like? Do I know how the monetary policies are applying? So, for example, what's the difference between fiscal policy and monetary policy? Can anybody help us here? What do you think the difference between fiscal and monetary policies? This is general knowledge brought forward. All right, I will leave that for you as your homework. All right. The next aspect, of course, is you must have a proper understanding of the global issues. What are the global issues that are happening in the business and financial world? Things like tariffs, things like trade barriers, things like the impact of development institutions, organizations. So you must have that understanding of the global issues, both in the business and financial world. But commonly now, which has picked up of recent in the last couple of years, is ethics. And I hope you've done the ethics model. Have you all guys done the ethics model? Have you done the ethics module yet? It's normally recommended that you do the ethics module before you sit for AFM. But I hope you've got in time to go to the ethics module. But this is quite common these days. The examiner will test your understanding of ethics, and here referring basically to business ethics. How can organizations do business in a more sustainable and ethical manner? All right. And then, of course, things like ESG, which is basically environmental, social, and governance issues. So these are some of the areas that is expected for you in your role as a senior finance executive. Now, I'm talking about this broadly, and I'll leave this as your homework. I'll just put a note here. This I'll leave as your homework. And you can read this read the study text. I hope all of you have now received the study text if you've registered. Then I'll also give you additional business reading. All right. So that's the first area. The second area of the syllabus, which is basically advanced investment appraisal. So this is a continuation of what you did at FM. This is simply a continuation. So the first thing we shall do is to have a recap of the financial management techniques that you covered at FM. Not recap of investment appraisal techniques. Things like, of course, NPV, things like internal rate of return, things like laser buy, things like capital rationing and the like. So we shall go through, first of all, a recap of all these techniques. And once we're done with those techniques, then we shall move to the next new area, which will be basically what are international investments. And other international investments shall be, our aim will be to understand what are the international investments, what is the motivation for companies to undertake international investments, what are the risks that they face international investments, and how do you evaluate an international investment. All right. From there, we shall move to the concept of free cash flows. We shall see what are free cash flows, how are they derived, and what is the purpose of free cash flows. How they are derived, and also the use or purpose of free cash flows. We'll then move to the financing impact on investment appraisal. How does financing impact investment appraisal? From your earlier knowledge, you know that financing of a business is done two ways. You have short-term financing that is basically covered under working capital management, and then you have long-term financing that is used for business expansion and acquisition of non-current assets, what you may call project investments. So how does financing of a project impact on the investment appraisal of that particular project? So financing impact on investment appraisal. And we shall also introduce a new term or technique, what referred to as APV, which is also what referred to as adjusted present value. So it's a new technique that we shall look at that you did not cover at FM. And then, of course, lastly, we shall conclude what referred to as real options. What are real options? How do they exist in a project? And how can you determine the value of a real option? From your earlier knowledge of FM, you must have studied about options. What are options? Basically, options are derivative instruments that give the holder the right to buy or sell the underlying asset. But what we're going to do is now to incorporate that knowledge of options and apply it to projects. And we shall refer to them as real options. We shall see how do we determine the value of options, how do we identify an embedded option in an investment or project, and how can we determine the overall viability of that investment project. So that will be the second area. Number one, the role of an executive, which is going to be your homework. This is your homework. And I assume that when you register for the course, you'll get the study text, and you can try and read further in the study text. But I'm also going to give you additional business reading. It is very important that at this level, you know what type of reading is required or necessary for you, because from your workplaces, they look at you as the elite or the cream. Everybody knows that you're studying ACCA, you're studying from MAT. They expect you to be very knowledgeable. So the knowledge you get is not only from class, but they expect you to have broad knowledge. For example, if I ask you what are the key global issues right now, at least you must be able to mention one or two things that are impacting organizations or businesses. We have seen things like the Iran conflict. You must know how does it impact the organization. We have seen things like trade tariffs between the US and China, between the US and Canada, between the US and Europe. between the US and Africa. So you must look at these things holistically, and that's what the examiner expects of you. All right, that was area number one. But before I go forward, I think let me just emphasize it here. I'm going to recommend you guys to read some newspapers. The first one I'm going to recommend, number one, is called the East African newspaper. This one is a very good paper because it has very good topical issues on business and global issues. And then number two, I'll recommend you to read what's called the Business Daily. Now, these two are all published by the Nation Media Group. You can buy them physically. I think the East African a paper costs, I think the physical copy costs, I think 3,000. But if you go to on the streets, on the supermarkets, some supermarkets have these papers. But alternatively, actually, get these papers online. So I'll just make it easy. They being a first class. I'll come here. eNation. You go to eNation Media. Oh, sorry. A second. All right, you go to the eNation Media, and this is how the Business Daily. Let me just get the most current one. There. You just create an account, and you can pay. East African. You just want to make sure that it say you have no excuse to say that I did not share this. But this just has business, which I think is a. It has money markets outlook and all that type of news that is necessary for at this level. This is how it looks like, and you can see that as you move ahead, you see if you put this, it will give you quite a bit of information, and you can talk. You can see what is being written or discussed about. All right, so that's how the East African looks like. The next one is Business Daily. This is how this one looks like. And you can see in Uganda it's 3,000, but online is much cheaper than this. 3,000 is for the physical copy, but if you do it online, I think it's at 1,000. But you can get the bundle much better than that. So I kindly request, please subscribe publication. Go under e-paper, eNation, and you get there. I'll subscribe for them. Just for okay, I've already subscribed for this, but if I was to, you would just simply come here and want. Once you register and create an account, email to show you what is available. So please subscribe online. If you want to buy, you can buy the physical, but I would kindly recommend that you do it online because it's much easier and much cheaper. All right. That's area number 2. Area number 3 are mergers and acquisitions, which have also become a hot topic these days for organizations to expand significantly and their businesses. One of the most common strategies applied for is mergers and acquisitions. We shall look at what is a merger, what is an acquisition. Here we shall look at first of all the growth strategy of mergers. How can you apply mergers as a growth strategy? You can see the types of mergers, mergers and acquisitions, what you refer to as M&As. shall see the risks involved or challenges. We shall look at the regulatory framework for mergers and acquisitions. We shall look at financing, mergers and acquisitions. And lastly, we shall conclude with valuation. And this is the key aspect here. How do you determine the value price, the company that is being bought? And we shall look at, and you did this earlier on in if I come back what you did at FM. We spoke about business valuations, but here we shall go into detail that company A wants to acquire company B. For example, Airtel wants to acquire Warid. How can the shareholders of Warid or Airtel determine the price at which they would sell Warid to Airtel? So this is very, very critical. Valuation. How and we shall simply build the various models we covered earlier. And if you recall the couple of models that we use for valuation, you have the cash flow model, you have the market model, you have the asset model. We shall simply build models depending on the scenario that has been provided. All right. Area number 4, if you look at advanced risk management, again, this is a continuation of what you covered earlier. If you recall, in FM, there are 2 major risks. Risk number 1 is what referred to as forex risk. Risk number 2, what referred to as interest rate risk. But our focus here is on how to mitigate or hedge. Our interest is how can these risks be hedged? Basically, we're looking at how do you hedge forex risk, how do you hedge interest rates, and the number of techniques we use derivatives. But I'll just highlight some of them. You can hedge. You can use or you can hedge using our forwards. You can hedge using our options. You can hedge using our futures. You can hedge using our swaps. Or we can hedge using our collars. So these are the various hedging techniques that can be applied. And we will go through each of these techniques and see how do we apply forwards in Forex, how do we apply forwards in interest rates, how do we apply futures in Forex, how do we apply futures in interest rates, how do we apply options in Forex, how do we apply options in interest rates. So basically here we're interested in the hedging techniques that are used to minimize or reduce the potential loss that can arise in case these risks what arise. Hedging techniques basically we have options, we have forwards, we have futures, we have options, we have swaps, we have collars rather. That's where our emphasis be. And then of course, but this is continuation. We'll then move to area number 5, which is basically reconstructions and organizations. And here we shall look at financial reconstructions, which is basically trying to change the balance sheet structure to generate value for the shareholder. We look at business reconstruction. How do you change the business holding? And you've seen companies day in, day out changing their business. For example, you saw recently when Stanchart exited the retail market. That's an example. And how did they exit the market? They exited the market by selling their retail arm. Here you have a reduction, but also an acquisition. That yes, I am exiting this business and I am selling it to another entity. These are very common in the exam that you find a situation where a company has itself purposes of maximizing, increasing shareholder value, and it can do that a sell. For example, Stanchart is exiting the retail market. How? By selling its business to ABSA. Then we shall go back into valuation. At what price would ABSA buy the assets and liabilities the retail Stanchart? And of course, lastly, it is organization structure. All right. And then lastly, number six is our professional skills. Professional skills. Now, the unfortunate thing about AFM that students face is because there's too much competition, students tend to focus mainly on the competition and miss out the easy marks professional skills. The exam is 100 marks, but of the 100 marks, 80 marks are looking at technical skills we have covered above. So 80 marks, 80%, or 80 marks, or 80% is technical skills. Which is basically things that looked at investment appraisal, things like risk, things like mergers and acquisitions. The construction and organization. That's where the 80% of the marks will be. And then 20% the marks will be professional skills. So these are some of the easy marks you can pick from the exam. And what are they testing in professional skills? There are areas the examiner tests. The first skill the examiner is looking at is number one, communication. Can you communicate? Communication. Because you're a senior executive, they expect to be able to communicate. Communicating means I must know my audience, and number two, I must know what my audience needs, and I must provide it to them in a precise and precise manner. So communication is clearly tested. Now, the structure of your exam, there are two sections, and I'll come back to that later. But section A, which is one question and carries 50 marks, be expected to write a report. So you must know how to write a report. How do we write a report? It seems very easy, but not as easy as people think. We expect you to know how report writing skills. So in the exam, given two templates, answer templates. You have one answer template, which is a simplified Excel worksheet, and then you have a second template, which is a simplified Word, rather a Word worksheet. So your answers will be written in Word, or the report will be written in Word, and then the workings have to be done in the Excel template. Please take note. You must know how we write a report, and quickly. How do you write a report? Of course, depending on how you're looking at it, some people will start with the date, then it will be from the CEO or CFO to the board. What's the subject? Subject is advanced financial management. What do you do? First start with introduction. Our objective is to pass the exam with at least 70%. Then you go to the key points of your discussion. Key points of discussion. It looks easy when I'm writing it here, but it's surprising that most students really struggle in the exam just to put the report in the basic format expected of you. So you first have the introduction, must be very clear, then go to key points of discussion, and just make sure that your report is clearly outlined, and say maybe number 1 is attend classes, attendance. Number 2, maybe revision. Number 3, maybe study groups. I'm just looking this but we can look at it with word. Number 4, maybe MAT as the tuition what? Provider. All right. And then what happens after that? We go to conclusion. What's the conclusion? To be able to pass the AFM exam, shall dedicate our time and study and study at MAT Abacus. But what I'm trying to show you is how do we write a professional report? The beginning aspects here, the introduction, the key points of discussion, and the conclusion. And then your workings in Excel then form the appendix. Appendix will be the Excel workings. So this is what the examiner expects of you. And for that particular question, they are up to 10 marks, simply testing you on the professional skills. So the first skill, report writing, rather communication. How do you write a proper professional report? Skill number 2 is how do you analyze, analysis and evaluation. And most times you see that the examiner will simply give us information and expect us to use our judgment. So, okay, if I want to determine, for example, the value stand chart, the value of company A, company B, what is the best technique I should use to determine that value? Should I use the net asset method? Should I look at the cash flows? Or should I use the market framework? So you must be able to analyze best the information provided. And from that information, make an evaluation whether it is bad, fair. So the examiner is testing you. Can you analyze information provided? Can you use the right models? Can you use the right frameworks? Can you make a judgment on what you have done? All right. Number 3, that we refer to as professional skepticism. What does that simply mean? It simply means that you must be certain of the assumption making. What are the assumptions you're making? How much information do you have? Are your assumptions reasonable? I want to determine the value of company A. I am going to assume very many things. I'm going to assume how much revenue they can generate. I'm going to assume what the growth will be in the future. But are those assumptions reasonable? And in most cases, the examiner will expect you to be able to talk about the assumptions you have used to determine the values you have. This is one of the most common questions that will always come in the exam. Discuss the assumptions and uncertainties that you have seen across evaluation. And then, of course, lastly, with the commercial acumen, commercial knowledge, where they expect you basically talk about have a general understanding of the business in terms of what are the business's strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, what are the threat risks that you see. They are up to 20%, 20 marks in the exam, professional skills. Each question in the exam has a component of professional skills, and these marks are given at the discretion of the examiner. It is unlike the 80. With the 80, there's a marking guide for the 80. The 80% is the marking guide. 20% is for the examiner. I like the way Sharon writes her. I like the way Sharon has analyzed her work. I like the way she has tested the assumption. I like the way she at the business in terms of what are the is available, what are the threats. So out of 10, I'll give her 8. Maybe out of 5, I'll give her. These professional skills are awarded at the discretion of the examiner. So you must try impress the examiner. Now, these skills are developed over time. One, they're developed based on how you read. Number 2, what information you have. Number 3, practice. Because I said at the beginning that at this level, the examiner is assuming that you guys are senior officers, wherever you're working. These are skills that he expects to have at the bare minimum. Can I analyze information given to me and make an evaluation? That you have given me revenues over the last 4 years. What do I see from these revenues? Are they going up? Are they going down? What is the risk that is there? What is I have been given a scenario. This scenario is a company that is operating in this industry. From my knowledge, this industry, and where this company? What are the company's weaknesses and strengths? So these professional skills, remember, are awarded at the discretion of the examiner. But he has up to 20% of the 100. The technical skills are only accounting 80%. I kindly ask and argue that going forward, you develop the skills slowly. They will not come overnight, and that I can understand. But it's practice. It's reading and reading. That's why you must be well informed in your studies. All right. I just want to go through the key areas of the syllabus for your information. But how is the exam structured? Let's look at the exam structure. Now, your exam has 2 sections. Section A which is 1 question of 50 marks. Remember, 10 marks are what? Professional skills. One question. And this question will cover any of the areas of the syllabus. So basically, your syllabus has, if I'm just go back to the syllabus areas, there are 4 syllabus areas. These are the 4 syllabus areas. That question will be along these lines. That will be looking at any of these 4 areas. And in most cases, the examiner likes combining them together. You will not have a question that looks at one syllabus area, but you have a question that covers various syllabus areas. They could give you a question that has risk management and investment appraisal. They could give you a question that has mergers and acquisitions and reconstruction. They could give you a question that has, for example, instructions and investment appraisal. So section A, which is one question, will be mix and match any of the areas of the syllabus. And then we shall move to section B, where you have 2 questions each, giving us how many? 25 marks. And out of these 25 marks, 5 marks are professional skills. So that's how your exam is structured. But unfortunately, or fortunately, all the areas of the syllabus will be examined. So there's no spotting, just to make it no, because students have that habit of trying what they think the examiner bring. No, all areas, the syllabus, be examined. So when you go to the exam, you will definitely have a question on investment appraisal. You will definitely have a question mergers and acquisitions. You will definitely have a question risk management. You will definitely have a question on reconstructions. And then, of course, you have the 20 marks where the examiner is testing skills. But also, in between these 4 areas, the examiner will also look at whether you understand the role executives. Number 1, how do you set objectives? How do you make strategies? You understand the macro environment. You have an idea of the global issues. You understand business ethics. You understand ESG in terms of environment and governance. So all areas of the syllabus be examined. All right. Let me just show you the recent pass rates over the last, I think from last 25, 6, 4, 45, 4, 47. So these are the worldwide pass rates. All the students who are sitting FM in the world. But on average, the average pass rate is 45%. What does this mean? It simply means there are more students failing than passing. The chances failing are higher than the chances passing. I want you to take note of that. The chances, the probability failing is much higher than the probability of passing. 55% students fail the exam, and 45% the students pass the exam. But these are international rates. It's not for MAT Abacus. The pass rate at MAT Abacus is far much higher than this. But I want to just understand it in a perspective. That it simply means that this exam is challenging. I don't want to say the word difficult because it's a difficult exam. We have seen people highly at MAT, 78, 76, 65, 69. So it's simply a challenging exam. And why is it challenging? Why is the exam challenging? The first reason why the exam is challenging is most students don't have a good grasp of FM. And that's why at the beginning I asked, when did you last sit your FM exams? And it's good that most of you start either this last sitting sometime at the beginning of this year or start the same last year, maybe with the exception of one. But that's the biggest challenge. Most students have a grasp FM. The first mistake, not the first mistake, the first thing the examiner asks is that anybody sitting advanced financial management has a grasp FM. And I forgot to mention it here, but let me just highlight it here. What does the examiner expect? They expect that whoever is sitting this exam has a grasp FM. Whatever you covered in FM from financial management function, working capital, investment appraisal, all that exam expected. So when we're discussing those items here, we simply brush over them. For example, when we start talking about capital, we shall just brush over it because we expect that you have an eye and a good understanding how capital is derived. When we start talking about business valuation, the understanding is have a good idea. When we go to options for forex, or options for interest rates, the assumption is that at that time you have a good understanding. So we shall not start from the very basic. Ideally, we're supposed to start from slightly a couple miles ahead. But that's one of the biggest challenges. Students have grasp FM. The second aspect challenge that why students fail this exam a lot. Number 2 is time management. How do you manage your time in the exam? Time management. Now, I'll talk more about time management later as we're moving towards the revision. But I will just emphasize how can you manage your time better in the exam, in this exam. But one of the reasons why they fail is that the other reason is lack of practice. Students have a common habit that when we talk about practice, students prefer to start practicing towards the exam. And by that time, it's late. But also, you don't get, there's a little of resources on the ACCA website and platform. So you must also practice this exam because your exam is purely based. The exam expects to have at least a general feel of how the exam is like. Number 4, little knowledge or scant knowledge. Of global and business issues. When we talk about international trade, most students will be very green. When we talk about development finance, most students will be very green. When we talk about fiscal policies, they should be very green. But this is what the examiner expects of you. That at your level, you must know what are the favorable fiscal policies that the government can have. What are the favorable monetary policies a government can have? How do those policies impact on the organization or company? And then, of course, lastly, poor professional skills. So this is the reason why you find the pass rates being 45. So, what is the medicine for this?
But you get one for each cup. Yeah, I don't want to.
What would I recommend for you? The first thing I'd recommend for you, number 1, is to register at MAT Abacus if you've not yet registered. And we are going to have, I think, 18 classes. This will be both physical and online. The first of classes, I think for the next couple of days, we shall have the classes virtually online. And then sometime later in September, it again. By that time I'll be in Kampala. Then we can have classes. And then, of course, the last, I think, 7 classes. Most likely to have the online virtually. But most importantly, first thing you have to do is register at MAT Abacus. Number, give AFM study time. Starting day is the 24th August. Please, 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 please. Just give it time. And time simply means you don't have to be a bookworm, but just spend some time, either 3 hours a day, depending on how much time you can wait. But must have sufficient time. There are no shortcuts. You don't expect that try to study at the very end. Must start studying there. For the first few minutes, I'm just going the generally the broad aspect of the paper. But once we're done with that, then I'll immediately go into the meat of it. So please give it time. Number 3, practice starts from day 1. I always tell my students that don't expect to have revision at the end. No, that will be simply a bonus for you. Our practice and revision starts from day 1 today. So that by the time we reach, we're now we're coming towards late August. But by the time we're approaching end of October, must have done a significant number of exams. By the time we finish October, must have done a significant number of exams, such that when we enter into November, simply just covered in class. But practice starts there. So also use the ACCA practice platform. Why am I recommending this? So that you have a feel how the exam template looks like. So that you have a feel of the exam environment. And this is available for ACCA platform. Simply go to the ACCA platform, register, and the platform and practice. There are quite a couple of resources on the platform. You have sample exam questions. You have past exam questions. Just to give you a feel how the exam feel like. All right, and then lastly, but not least, is utilize, register, fully utilize the tutor. I will be available until exams. If you're reading and something not clear, you can send me a text, you can call me. If something that will understand, please ask for me to repeat it. If I'm going very fast, because at the end of the day, you need to get your money's worth. But not even that. But at the end of the day, it is my happiness to pass the exam. It is so painful to see a student failing the exam, which they could have passed. And simply because maybe you've not utilized the resources you have. The resources you have are not what you've been given, but also the availability of the tutor. So I will be available in case you need any help outside and during the class. I'll share with you my details, both on email and both on WhatsApp, and you can contact me. The there could be time differences, but I will try to make sure that I adjust that time. All right. And lastly, number 6, practice or memorize the formulas. One of the problems which I should have mentioned earlier on here is that there are many formulas that come across AFM, very many formulas. And unfortunately, the exam only provides you about 10 formulas in the exam. So that means the rest of the formulas, you must memorize them. And memorizing is not something that happens overnight. It's a repetitive process. You must learn how to memorize these formulas. And I'll tell you how to memorize. Memorizing formulas is not complicated. It is simply a repetitive process action. All right. Let me just pause here for a minute. Now, the way we shall do our classes, I will do the classes here in Excel. I will share this Excel working with you for about this. So it's up to you. You can either sit back and just watch. You can also do side note, whichever you find convenient. But at the end of the day, I'll share with you these Excel workings, and you can go to them and make adjustments as and when you feel. But I'm going to pause there for a minute, just in case you have any questions. Ask before you proceed. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen?
What's the best way to memorize the formulas?
Thank you, Donald. What's the best way to memorize formulas? Memorizing formulas, or rather, memorizing things. Some people have what you call perfect photographic memories. Some people, but not the majority of us. So the best thing to do with the formulas, and I always encourage you to have a formula sheet. So I expect to have a sheet of paper. Every time we put a formula in class here, write it in your formula sheet. And once you put it in your formula sheet, look at your formulas first thing in the morning, of course, after your prayers, but just sometime in the morning and sometime before bed. If you do that continuously for 2-3 weeks, those formulas will stick. One, have a formula sheet, which is simply a sheet of paper where you put all the formulas you apply here. Secondly, what you do, look at the formula sheet early morning, look at the formula sheet late evening before you go to bed. In that way, those formulas will stick. The worst thing is going to the exam and you've forgotten the formula. What happens? You start panicking. And once you start panicking, that's the beginning of the end. But when you go to the exam and you're confident and you know a formula and you can write it down easily and work, that makes your life much easier. You move much faster. And of course, you have the necessary confidence that's required. So, Donald, that's how I would recommend you memorize, master these formulas.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right. Being our first class, I want to set the ball rolling. I think I've spoken enough. I'll start with the first area of the syllabus. Now, just to emphasize, let me just here, just emphasize for the avoidance of doubt. The first two areas, the first area and the second area, this is, I already spoken about this first area of the syllabus. This is the homework. I have study texts, and I've also recommended additional reading for you. Please subscribe to the East African, subscribe to Business Daily, so that you have knowledge beyond what we study in class, so that you can apply what we study in class in real business scenarios happening. Right. This one shall practice over time. I'll just put a note here. Be practiced during session. So our focus going forward with these 4 areas: advancement appraisal, mergers and acquisitions, risk management, and then transactions and organization. So to set the ball rolling, I will start with the first area, advanced investment appraisal. And like I said earlier, there are 5 areas I'll cover under advanced investment appraisal. I will just copy this quickly. Number 1, I'll go through a recap of what you covered at FM. Number 2, I'll look at international investments. Number 3, I'll look at free cash flows. Number 4, we'll look at financing impact. And lastly, I'll wind up and summarize with real options. It is very important that you have a general overview of the syllabus. That if you talk about investment appraisal, what are the areas in investment appraisal? There are simply 5 areas. Okay, go back to what you studied earlier on for the benefit of everybody. Then look at international investments, what they are. We'll go into the concept of free cash flows, how it is used, how it is derived, and the purpose. You can then look at financing impact, investment appraisal, and introduce a new technique referred to as adjusted present value, what is referred to commonly as APV. And lastly, we'll wind up with our real option. So number 1, I'll go to the recap here, what was covered earlier on. Now, if you remember in FM, when you're doing investment appraisal, there were about 5 areas you looked at. The first area I looked at was just the techniques of investment appraisal. What are the techniques? But before I even go to this, let me just talk about this briefly. What is the purpose of investment appraisal? The purpose, the primary purpose, is determine whether an investment or project is financially viable, or what you may call financially feasible. Is our project financially viable? That's the primary purpose of investment appraisal. And financial viability, financial visibility is seen as you have to demonstrate an increase in shareholder value. So whatever investment we're doing, whatever project we're undertaking, we must be able to demonstrate that there's going to be an increase in shareholder value. Remember, the primary objective of the company is maximizing shareholder value. That's the primary objective. So when we are carrying out investment appraisal, it's simply to say, this investment, this project I want to undertake, is it financially viable? Does it increase shareholder value. That's the whole essence of investment appraisal. But what did you cover earlier on? Number one, if you remember, at the techniques of investment appraisal. What are the techniques of appraisal? Number two, looked at how do we determine the impact of taxation of appraisal. Number three, looked at the impact of inflation appraisal. Number four, you looked at some specific scenarios in investment appraisal. For example, if you remember, scenario number one was lease or buy. Scenario number two was capital rationing. Scenario number three was asset replacement. Lastly, scenario number four, where you had risk and what? Uncertainty. So these are what things you covered earlier. So I'm going to put these areas quickly, and where there are new areas that are examined at FM, out them out. So largely much of this we did it at FM, but if there's something new that was not done at FM and is examined at FM, I'll clearly outline it. But let's start with techniques of appraisal. Our techniques of appraisal, we have two major techniques of appraisal. Number one, we have what referred to as the non-discounted techniques. Non-discounted techniques. And then number two, we have what referred to as our discounted techniques. Number two is the discounted techniques. The difference between one and two is that it's just that one applies the cost of discounting, the other doesn't apply the cost of what? Of discounting. And under non-discounted, we have one, return on capital employed, what sometimes referred to as accounting rate of return. And then number two, we have our payback period. All this is still examinable at this point. But this is information the examiner should from the previous studies. This is still examinable, but the examiner makes the assumption that a student is conversant. This must know what is return on capital employed or accounting rate of return, must know what is payback period. So the examiner expects to hear what? The examiner expects, number one, the technique, and be able to discuss the challenges, limitations, these techniques. I won't go into details, but in case if you need, please, you can refer to earlier. But at least you must know how to calculate accounting rate of return, return on capital employed. Sometimes, generally, they may refer to it as return on investment. Not quite often, a couple of books refer to it as any of those. And also, what is the payback period? Can I determine the payback period of a project? And what are the limitations using the payback period? The primary limitation of these methods is that they do not concept of discounting. And discounting, as you know, is one of the most primary concepts in financial management because it shows the value or the importance of time, what referred to as time value of money. All right, on the discounted side, number one here we have our NPV, what we refer to as net present value, which of course, as you might know by now, this is the primary method of investment appraisal. So I'll just put a note here. This is the primary method investment appraisal. Also, the other alternative is referred to as the internal rate of return, commonly abbreviated as our IRR. This is secondary method appraisal that you can use, but that also uses the concept of discounting, IRR and NPV. Now you already did NPV. I'm just doing a quick recap. So in case something is not clear, please don't hesitate to ask me. But let me start with number one, NPV. Like we said, this is the primary method of appraisal. I'll just emphasize that one more time. It's the primary method. Of appraisal. But before I go to that, let me just emphasize here what these techniques mean. What is discounting? So when we talk about discounting, the examiner expects a couple of things. Number one, the examiner expects what is discounting. The examiner expects to know how discount. And lastly, number three, why discount? Simple questions, but it's important that you understand them. What is discounting? How do we discount? And why we discount? Discounting is simply getting the present value in a future value. If you recall, discounting is simply getting the present value in the future value. How do we discount? Discount, we get the future value and we multiply the corresponding discount factor. Why do we discount? We discount because we must get the value of our investment now, because the decision done or undertaken has to be done there now. Those are the three reasons, background reasons you must. What is discounting? How do we discount? And why we discount? But back to NPV. What's NPV? It's the net present value, which is basically the primary method. What? Appraisal. NPV is basically, NPV is simply equals to a sum present value. A sum present values. What's the present value? A present value is simply getting the future value times the corresponding discount factor, which I'm going to abbreviate as DF. That's how we get a present value. So NPV is simply the sum. What's present value? The future value times the corresponding discount factor. And the discount factor, we can get them using, we can either use the calculator, the formula, or we can simply use the what? The tables. Now, because you'll be working in simplified Excel, I expect to be able to apply the formula for discounting. A discount factor, according to the formula, is equal to what? 1 plus R to the power negative what? N. We must apply this in Excel. That this is how we get our discount factor. 1 plus R power N. And R is the rate of discounting, and N are the number of years. So, what is the rule? The rule is simple. The decision rule. The decision rule is what we do: accept project if NPV is what? Positive. Positive simply means any value higher than 0. Accept the project if the NPV is positive. Or simply do what? Decline project if NPV is negative. I will share with these workings with you, so don't worry about it. So it's up. You can simply sit back and watch. We can simply write summary notes, but you'll get these workings at the end of the class. So this is how we get our NPV. Decision rule: accept if positive, decline if negative. Why? Because a positive NPV is adding shareholder value. So what does the examiner expect of the student at this level? The examiner's expectation is, number one, a student can lay out the project cash flow. I'll abbreviate cash flow as CF. That a student at where we are right now, who has done FM, can lay out the cash flow investment. Now, I'll use the two words concurrently. I either call it a project or an investment. But the examiner expects to be able to lay out the project or investment's cash flow. Number two, determine the appropriate discount rate. Apply. And what's the discount rate we use? We use the weighted average of capital. Number one, lay out the cash flows. Number two, be able to determine what's the appropriate. Sometimes the examiner will give you the rate. Sometimes the examiner will expect you to use the knowledge and say, okay, from the information provided, this is how I get the capital. And then I'll use the capital, get the NPV. So the NPV will be derived from the cash flows and the corresponding cost of capital. So of course, lastly, number three is NPV and make a decision. The decision is either to say yes or no. But once in a while, we may have a situation where you have two competing projects. And if you have two or more projects, then of course you take the project with the higher what? NPV. So I just put here a note. I just put a note here. For two or more projects, select project with higher NPV. All right. So this is what the examiner expects of you. So number one, let's see how to lay out the cash flows. To lay out the cash flows, this we've done before. So quickly, I'll just go through it quickly. I'll have here our year one, or year zero, depending on the number of years of the project. I'll just take maybe 5 years. And what you do, of course, you will start with the revenues. Now remember that in the exam, you're expected to clearly see working. So this will be an appendix that will have to be done in the simplified Excel worksheet. So you have your revenues, you have the corresponding costs. I'm just trying to just to make it just an outline so that you see. In case you've forgotten, you'll have your revenues, and I hope you know how we get revenues. Revenues are a component, the product of revenues and what of quantity sold and the price. Shall have of course our costs. Just 1 second.